My hand shook as I signed the last page. 47 signatures across documents that dissolved Meridian Technologies, the company I'd spent 16 years building from a cramped studio apartment into a $2.3 billion enterprise. Across the mahogany table sat two people. My business partner Marcus Chen, who I'd met at Stanford and trusted with half my company, and my ex-wife Victoria Ashford, who I'd married on a yacht in Monaco 7 years ago. They sat close enough that their shoulders touched. That small detail told me everything the lawyer's clinical language didn't. "This concludes the transfer," the attorney said, sliding the folder toward Marcus. "Meridian Technologies is now under sole ownership of Mr. Chen, with Mrs. Ashford serving as Chief Operating Officer." I looked at the papers. My signature was still wet. 16 years, $2.3 billion, 3,400 employees gone, but they forgot one thing. 72 hours earlier, I was still a billionaire. Let me show you how they did it. I started Meridian in 2007 with $40,000 borrowed from my uncle and an algorithm I'd coded during my last semester at Stanford. The software analyzed supply chain inefficiencies in real time, something Fortune 500 companies desperately needed but couldn't build themselves. Marcus was my roommate then, a finance major who understood markets better than anyone I knew. He raised our first $2 million while I perfected the code. By 2010, we had 12 clients. By 2015, we had 847. I met Victoria at a tech gala in 2016. She was a marketing executive at a competitor, brilliant at translating complex technology into stories investors understood. We married 11 months later. She joined Meridian as CMO 6 months after that. The three of us built something extraordinary: predictive logistics software that saved our clients $340 million annually. But what I didn't know was they'd been planning this for 18 months. The signs were there, I just didn't want to see them. I worked 90-hour weeks, missed Victoria's birthday 3 years running, skipped our anniversary for a board meeting in Singapore. Marcus started making executive decisions without calling me first, restructuring departments I'd built. I told myself he was being proactive. Victoria grew distant, spending weekends at our lake house alone while I stayed in the city. Financial discrepancies appeared in quarterly reports, nothing major, just numbers that didn't quite align. Our CFO mentioned it twice. I waved him off. Too busy closing a $180 million contract with Amazon. My executive assistant, Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus, started working late, arrived early. She noticed documents being photocopied after hours, Marcus meeting with board members in parking garages rather than conference rooms, Victoria taking calls she wouldn't explain. The week before it happened, Sarah handed me a manila folder. "You need to see this," she said. Her hands trembled. I set it on my desk, told her I'd look at it after my investor call. That call went long. The folder stayed closed. The board meeting was scheduled as a strategic planning session for our Series D funding round. All 12 board members attended. Marcus presented first, his voice steady and rehearsed. He opened with a slide titled Financial Irregularities, Pattern Analysis 2021-2023. My stomach dropped. He walked them through fabricated evidence of my embezzlement. Offshore accounts in my name, wire transfers to shell companies, forged documents showing me siphoning $127 million over 3 years. The forensics looked flawless. Account numbers, transfer dates, even my digital signature on authorization forms I'd never seen. Victoria spoke next, her voice breaking at precisely calculated moments. She described my erratic behavior at home, paranoia, rage, insomnia. She showed the board photos of our home office, papers scattered, my laptop open to flight searches for non-extradition countries. I sat frozen, watching my life get dismantled in PowerPoint. 6 board members I'd known for a decade avoided my eyes. 3 asked questions Marcus answered with documentation I couldn't refute because I'd never seen it before. 1 demanded I respond. I opened my mouth. Nothing came. What do you say when the evidence of your guilt is perfect and completely fabricated? The vote was 11-1 to remove me immediately, freeze my assets pending investigation, and install Marcus as CEO with Victoria as COO. The board member who voted against it, Richard Hayes, my first investor, wouldn't meet my eyes as security escorted me out. As I passed Marcus and Victoria in the hallway, I saw it. Just for a second, his hand brushed hers. She leaned into him. The gesture was intimate, automatic, practiced. That's when I knew this wasn't about the company, this was personal. The press conference happened 4 hours later. I watched it from a hotel room, my phone exploding with messages I couldn't bring myself to read. Marcus stood at a podium with the Meridian logo behind him, Victoria at his side. They positioned themselves as reluctant whistleblowers who discovered my corruption and agonized over exposing someone they loved. "We wanted to believe there was an explanation," Victoria said, her voice steady now that cameras were rolling. But the evidence was overwhelming. By evening, my face was on CNBC, Bloomberg, TechCrunch. Billionaire tech CEO accused of massive fraud. My lawyer, the expensive one I'd had on retainer for 6 years, called to say he was dropping me as a client. "Conflict of interest," he explained. "The firm also represents Meridian. Friends I'd known since Stanford stopped returning calls. My father left a voicemail asking if it was true, his voice hollowed out with disappointment. The police interviewed me for 6 hours. They had everything, bank statements, emails, witness testimony from employees Marcus had clearly prepared. My public defender, a tired woman named Janet Morris, reviewed the evidence and told me what I already knew. This is airtight, whoever built this case knew what they were doing. My accounts were frozen except for one personal checking account Victoria hadn't known about. Balance, $847. I moved into a furnished studio apartment in Fremont, 40 minutes from the Palo Alto headquarters where my name still appeared on the building. The rent was $1,400 a month. I'd bought Victoria's engagement ring for $85,000. My former competitor, a logistics company called Velocity Chain, offered me contract work analyzing their supply routes. The pay was $12,000 a month. 3 years earlier, I'd made that in 90 minutes. Janet told me the criminal case would take 18 months to build, maybe 2 years to go to trial. Best case scenario, you serve 4 years and pay restitution on money you didn't steal, she said. Worst case, 15 years federal. One night I drove past my old house in Atherton. The lights were on. Through the window, I saw Marcus and Victoria in the living room I'd designed, drinking wine by the fireplace I'd commissioned. They were laughing. I sat in my 12-year-old Honda Civic I'd sold my Tesla to pay Janet's retainer and watched them celebrate their victory in my home. That night, I finally opened Sarah's folder. Inside were 47 pages that changed everything. The first page was a photocopy of a wire transfer from Marcus's personal account to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Date, March 2021. Amount, $4. $7 million. The next 20 pages were similar transfers, each between $2 million and $8 million, spanning from 2019 to 2023. Total, $287 million. Marcus hadn't just framed me for embezzlement. He'd actually been embezzling, then built a false trail leading to me. Pages 21-33 were emails. Marcus to Victoria, Victoria to Marcus, dating back 19 months. The affair was obvious. Can't wait to see you tonight, and he'll never notice we're gone, but so was the conspiracy. One email from Victoria, dated 14 months before the board meeting. We need to move faster. The IPO timeline means we have less than 2 years to position this properly. Marcus's reply, the forensic trail is clean. Even if he hires investigators, they'll find exactly what we want them to find, his name on everything. Pages 34-40 were patent documents. Every core algorithm that made Meridian valuable, the predictive modeling, the real-time optimization, the machine learning integration, listed me as the sole inventor. Marcus's name appeared nowhere. Our original partnership agreement stipulated that intellectual property created before the company's formation remained with the creator. I'd written that code before we incorporated. It was mine. The final pages were bank records showing shell companies Marcus had created in 2018, each one designed to siphon money from Meridian's accounts. And a sticky note from Sarah, her handwriting rushed. I made copies before they locked you out. They don't know these exist. I can stay at the company, feed you information, but you need to move fast. I had the evidence, but I needed something else, time, money, and a way back in. My uncle, Thomas Ashford, no relation to Victoria despite the shared surname, was the man who'd loaned me $40,000 in 2007. He'd sold his own tech company in 2004 for $340 million and retired to Napa. I'd repaid his loan with 800% interest. We'd stayed close. When I called him at 6 a.m. the morning after reading Sarah's folder, he answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting for this call," he said. We met at his estate that afternoon. He'd already hired a private investigator and a forensic accountant. "I knew something was wrong when the news broke," he explained. "You're many things, Nathan, but you're not a thief. And you're certainly not stupid enough to leave that kind of trail." He slid a check across the table, $5 million. "Consider it an investment, take back what's yours." Sarah agreed to stay at Meridian as my inside source. The risk was enormous. If Marcus discovered her loyalty, she'd face legal consequences herself. But she'd worked for me for 8 years since she was 23. "You gave me my career," she said. "I'm not letting them destroy you." I hired real lawyers. Not Janet, though she'd done her best. I needed a firm that specialized in corporate fraud and had no ties to Meridian. I found Steinberg and Cole in San Francisco, led by a woman named Patricia Steinberg who'd prosecuted securities fraud for the SEC before going into private practice. She reviewed Sarah's folder for 6 hours, then looked at me across her desk. "This is prosecutable, but we need more, and we have a deadline." She pulled up Meridian's corporate filings on her laptop. "They're planning an IPO in 89 days. Once they go public, the stock dilution and institutional ownership will make it nearly impossible for you to regain control. If we're going to move, it has to be now." Patricia's forensic accountant, a meticulous Korean woman named Dr. Min-seo Park, found what Sarah's folder had started. Marcus had stolen $340 million over 6 years, not $287 million. The additional $53 million had been laundered through a real estate investment company that owned properties in Miami, Austin, and Seattle. Marcus's brother was listed as the owner. The private investigator, a former FBI agent named Derek Walsh, did what I couldn't, followed Marcus and Victoria. He captured photos of them at restaurants, hotels, my lake house. More importantly, he recorded conversations. California is a 2-party consent state for recordings, so nothing he captured could be used in court. But it confirmed what Sarah's emails had shown. They'd been planning this since late 2021, before Victoria and I even started having problems. The marriage was already dead. I just didn't know I was living in its corpse. Sarah, still at Meridian, copied internal communications. Board members were growing nervous. Richard Hayes, the one who'd voted against my removal, had hired his own lawyer to review the evidence. 2 other board members were asking Marcus questions about financial discrepancies that predated my supposed fraud. Marcus was scrambling to explain inconsistencies he'd assumed no one would notice. Patricia filed a sealed motion with the U.S. District Court, presenting evidence of the actual embezzlement, the fabricated evidence against me, and the conspiracy between Marcus and Victoria. Judge Andrea Kimball, a federal judge with a reputation for aggressive prosecution of corporate fraud, issued a gag order and opened an investigation. Marcus didn't know yet. Neither did Victoria. We had time, but not much. I reached out to 3 board members privately: Richard Hayes, Diane Foster, and James Akoy. I showed them partial evidence, enough to raise doubt, not enough to reveal my full hand. Richard admitted he'd regretted his silence during the vote. Diane said she'd felt pressured by the other board members. James asked the question that mattered: "If you can prove this, what do you need from us?" "When the time comes," I said, "I need you to vote with me, not with Marcus. 60 days until IPO. Then Victoria made a mistake that handed me everything." Victoria agreed to an interview with TechCrunch. She'd always been brilliant with press, and Marcus encouraged it. They wanted to rehabilitate Meridian's image before the IPO, position themselves as ethical leaders who'd made a hard choice. The interview went well for 40 minutes. The journalist asked about company culture, about their vision, about the upcoming public offering. Then she asked about me. Victoria should have stuck to the script, express regret, emphasize the evidence, move on. Instead, she went further. She described me as emotionally abusive, claimed I'd thrown objects during arguments, said I'd threatened her multiple times. She gave specific dates, specific incidents. One story placed me at our lake house on March 14, 2022, screaming at her until 2 a.m. I was in Tokyo that entire week. I had passport stamps, hotel records, meeting notes with Japanese executives. Patricia saw the interview within an hour of publication and called me immediately. She just committed defamation with provable false statements. This is prosecutable. Victoria's mistake went deeper than bad PR. The same week, Marcus tried to move $23 million from one of his shell companies to an account in Singapore. Sarah, monitoring everything, alerted Patricia. Patricia alerted the federal investigator assigned to Judge Kimball's inquiry. The transfer was flagged as suspicious, frozen mid-transaction. Marcus tried to call the bank, was told there was a regulatory hold. He didn't know why. Not yet, I had them on fraud, embezzlement, defamation, and conspiracy. Patricia prepared legal filings that would destroy them in any courtroom, but I didn't file them, not yet. I wanted them to feel what I felt, the disbelief. The helplessness, the moment when you realize your whole life is being erased. Meridian announced the IPO date, November 18, 2023. The press celebrated. Meridian Technologies to go public, valuation expected at $3.2 billion. Marcus and Victoria did a joint interview with Bloomberg, positioned as the power couple leading a tech company into its next phase. They talked about innovation, about trust, about building something bigger than themselves. I watched from my apartment, Sarah's folder on my desk next to Patricia's legal filings. Everything was ready. The federal investigation had quietly expanded. Judge Kimball had reviewed all evidence and authorized criminal charges pending final review by the U.S. Attorney's Office. Bank accounts were being traced. Board members Richard, Diane, and James were asking Marcus increasingly pointed questions in private. Marcus, sensing something wrong, grew paranoid. He accused employees of leaking information. He had it review email logs. He nearly fired Sarah, but she was too valuable. She knew all my old systems, and the company still ran on infrastructure I'd built. 10 days before the IPO, I made the first move. Patricia filed the lawsuit at 9 a.m. on a Monday. Civil suit against Marcus Chen and Victoria Ashford for fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and defamation. Attached evidence. 340 pages of bank records, emails, forensic analysis, and witness testimony. We filed simultaneously with the SEC, presenting evidence that Meridian's S-1 filing for the IPO was based on fraudulent financials. Specifically, that $340 million in losses had been concealed through false accounting. By 10 a.m., Marcus's lawyers were calling Patricia's office. By 11 a.m., the SEC had frozen Meridian's IPO pending investigation. By noon, Judge Kimball issued a court order freezing all assets held by Marcus Chen and Victoria Ashford pending resolution of the civil and criminal investigations. By 2 p.m., the press had the story. Meridian Technologies IPO frozen amid fraud investigation. Emergency board meeting at 4 p.m. Sarah listened from outside the conference room, texted me updates in real time. Marcus tried to dismiss it as a baseless attack by a disgraced former CEO. But Richard Hayes had already reviewed my evidence. He stood up, read sections of Marcus's own emails aloud, and demanded an independent forensic audit. 3 other board members joined him. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Victoria tried to distance herself from Marcus, claimed she hadn't known about the embezzlement. But Patricia had already filed the email evidence showing she'd helped plan every step. Too late. She was named in the federal investigation alongside Marcus. The lawsuit was just distraction. While their lawyers scrambled, I was making the real move. My Uncle Thomas contacted institutional investors who'd committed to the IPO, BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity. He showed them Patricia's evidence, explained that Marcus had defrauded the company, that the IPO was built on fabricated financials. He explained that I still owned 34% of Meridian through a corporate structure Marcus had overlooked, shares held in a trust I'd established in 2015 for estate planning. Marcus had assumed those shares were dissolved when I was removed. They weren't. With Thomas's backing, institutional investors who'd committed $800 million to the IPO demanded an emergency shareholder meeting. They wanted Marcus out, they wanted independent leadership, and they wanted the person who'd actually built the technology, me, to explain what the company was really worth. The shareholder meeting happened 72 hours after my lawsuit was filed. Patricia stood with me. Sarah was there too, no longer hiding her loyalty. Marcus tried to argue that I was lying, that the evidence was fabricated. Richard Hayes cut him off. We've had 3 independent forensic firms review Nathan's evidence. It's legitimate. You've been stealing from this company for 6 years. The vote wasn't close. With my 34%, Thomas's voting power as a major investor, institutional backing, and 3 board members who'd flipped, we had 67% control. The board voted to remove Marcus Chen as CEO, remove Victoria Ashford as COO, and reinstate me as Chief Executive Officer effective immediately. Marcus stood, his face pale. You can't do this. I built this company with you. No, I said, you helped me build it, then you tried to steal it, there's a difference. Security escorted him out, the same guard who'd walked me out of the building 11 weeks earlier. Marcus screamed that I'd never prove anything, that his lawyers would destroy me, that I was finished. He was wrong. The FBI was waiting in the lobby. Federal agents arrested Marcus Chen on 17 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Victoria Ashford was arrested simultaneously on 12 counts, including conspiracy and accessory charges. Both were denied bail, flight risk, given the offshore accounts and international financial ties. The media reversal was immediate. Tech CEO framed by business partner in $340 million embezzlement scheme. Patricia did one press conference, presented the evidence methodically, then I refused all other interviews. I didn't need to gloat, the facts spoke. Marcus's trial lasted 6 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming, his own emails, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the fabricated documents. He was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. Victoria took a plea deal, testified against Marcus in exchange for 7 years. Her testimony confirmed everything. The affair, the conspiracy, the systematic destruction of my reputation. In court she cried. I watched from the gallery, felt nothing. Board members who'd voted to remove me resigned quietly. I accepted their resignations without comment. Richard Hayes stayed. So did Diane and James. We rebuilt the board with people who understood loyalty wasn't just convenience. Meridian's IPO was rescheduled for March 2024, 6 months after the arrests. Patricia worked with the SEC to ensure every financial statement was accurate, every disclosure complete. When we finally went public, the company was valued at $3.1 billion, lower than Marcus's false projections but higher than our actual worth when I'd been removed. I owned 34%, now worth $1.5 billion. I promoted Sarah to vice president of operations and gave her 2% equity. She'd risked everything. She deserved to win too. 6 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where Marcus and Victoria had destroyed me. The room looked the same. The table, the chairs, the view of Palo Alto through floor-to-ceiling windows, but everything was different. I'd restructured Meridian completely. New CFO, new COO, new general counsel. I instituted financial audits every quarter by independent firms. I established a whistleblower program that protected employees who reported fraud. I limited executive authority. No one person could make decisions that affected the company's core operations without board oversight. The company thrived. Our software was still the best in the industry. Clients who'd left during the scandal came back. New contracts poured in. By 2024, we were worth $3.8 billion. I used part of my wealth to fund a legal defense organization for fraud victims, people who'd been framed or falsely accused and couldn't afford representation. Named it the Ashford Foundation after my uncle, not my ex-wife. He'd saved me when no one else would. The foundation helped 340 people in its first year. That number felt right. I married Sarah in a private ceremony in Napa, just family and close friends. No spectacle, no press. She'd proven her loyalty when it cost her everything. That's the only kind of partnership worth having. Marcus and Victoria were in separate federal prisons 1,500 miles apart. I never contacted them. never visited, never thought about them except when reporters asked. They taught me something valuable, though I'd paid $3 billion to learn it. Success makes you powerful, but losing everything teaches you who deserves that power.